Hello and welcome to today's webinar titled Future of Experience for Indian Manufacturers, organized by Tech Mahindra in partnership with Salesforce and etbrandequity.com. I'm Baishakhi, your host for the day. Industry 4.0 has taken over the global manufacturing industry and has brought with it the connected digital experience. Its importance became even more prominent when the pandemic completely disrupted operations and overall manufacturing businesses. The Indian manufacturing ecosystem has been proactive in digital transformation, strategically investing in technologies like AI, advanced analytics, robotics, automation, and so on. Time is right now for businesses to adopt a renewed investment and growth formula to realign their technologies and manufacturing strategies. To discuss more on how technology is shaping the manufacturing ecosystem, I would like to invite Arundhati Bhattacharya, Chairman and CEO of Salesforce India, and Charu Kapoor, Senior Vice President, Head Enterprise of Future, Tech Mahindra, for an opening discussion on successful technology adoption. A quick round of introduction before we start. Starting with Ms. Bhattacharya, who comes along with over 40 years of rich experience in industries financial sector, has worked across varied roles and diverse national and international locations. During her tenure as the first ever woman chair of State Bank of India, she has stamped her imprint on the financial world not only in India but globally. She has also engineered the merger of the mother bank with its six associate banks, creating an entity three times the size of its nearest competitor. Next, we have Ms. Kapoor, who is a tech-savvy business leader capable of leading complex deals in sales and customer success. She has demonstrated efficiency in strategy definition, execution, and delivery. She also has experience in building and leading high-performance teams and supporting cloud adoption. Ms. Kapoor is an adept professional developing and nurturing C-level relationships and delivering customer success. So without further delay, we'll start off with our first session today. Over to you, Ms. Bhattacharya and Ms. Kapoor.
Thank you, Baishakhi, and a very warm welcome to you, Arundhati.
Thank you.
So it's a pleasure, Arundhati, to be able to host you and chat with you. You know, you're a hugely iconic personality on the Indian corporate stage. You've achieved a lot in your lifetime, and everyone on the call today, in the webinar today, are very familiar with who you are. So you need no introductions. A question that baffles many of us is, why would a person like you, who has achieved, pretty much ticked all the boxes off, had headed off into retirement, decides to throw that mantle off and take on the challenge, with a company like Salesforce, hugely differentiating environments. You come from a stage 200-year-old public sector banking industry to this bleeding edge, aggressive, high growth, born in the cloud, Salesforce wanting to, fly and conquer the skies. Why take on such an aggressive charter and come back?
Well, first of all, Charu, thank you. It's great just chatting with you and not talking business or negotiating hard on something or the other. So it's good, to be on the same side of the table for a change. And as for your question, lots of people have termed me crazy, especially my friends. They don't really understand what makes me tick. But, I have really all my life enjoyed learning new things, taking on new challenges. And technology has been something that's been very central to my thoughts, especially as I led the bank, because I realized one thing, that it doesn't matter what kind of an organization you are. If you don't have a very strong technology backbone, you are not going to survive. This age is very different from any of the others that we have seen before. And this age is also different because cycles for everything is getting shorter. And the shorter the cycles get, the more the evolution. You need to have people who are adaptable, who learn swiftly, who are able to change the way they think. And much of this can be enabled only by technology. Just the human mind will not be able to do it. The other area where I think, technology is very important, it's important in a country like India, where, you need to deliver services to millions and millions of people. Trying and delivering them without a strong technology solution is not something that's workable at all. And it is true of the entire world today. And in fact, when we did the financial inclusion program in my earlier organization, even developed world regulators, when I used to describe it to them, they used to get really interested and ask us for minute details, because they had not been able to do the same in their country. Just imagine the UPI platform, okay, the unified payments interface that we have. The UPI platform can connect up to 4 banks at real time and do a real time payment and settlement, something which I don't think even the US has. So, technology is actually a solution for the kind of problems that India faces. And this was an opportunity that just came out of the blue. And I thought that, I had been giving a lot of advice, and as they say, gyan, being the sort of the old person in the room and giving a lot of advice, telling people you've got to relearn things, you've got to unlearn things. And here was an opportunity when I could actually probably, walk the talk, which I have always tried to do. So I thought, why not? And probably it also indicates, Mark Benioff's bent of mind. He is willing to go outside of the sort of the proven guidelines, or rather proven guardrails, and really think differently to see what can be sort of brought in. Either ways, this is where I've landed. And though it's a pretty rocky journey, but I must say I'm enjoying it.
So the win is all for Salesforce and Mark Benioff to have somebody like you at the helm, and all the experience and maturity that you bring in, because we know that technology transformation is not simple, right? Even being able to create the environment for technology adoption, which is what you are potentially doing in this new role, helping India drive that change. And it's interesting that you say that it's a great opportunity for India to drive change, and also a lot more complex because India has to do it at scale.
Absolutely.
Anything we do, we need to do it to be able to reach billions of people at the same time. So we need proven solutions. We need maturity in terms of what we drive and what we bring into the markets. What's your advice to our customers who are listening in today? What is some guidance that you could share on how they could drive these technology disruptions in this environment?
So I think, one thing is very important, and that is to get buy-in of your own people. That is really very, very, important. When I went into SBI and became the chairman, and when I realized the state at which we were, where digital transformation or technology was concerned, I really felt that, we needed to have a big step change. We needed to leapfrog. And so when I first mooted the idea of a digital transformation, the first response was, we already have internet banking. And in fact, Tech Mahindra runs it for us, and it's very, very good. And we also have mobile banking. So what is the digital stuff that you're talking about? So the first thing that I did is we created an offsite, and I had most of the tech majors come and talk to us about what was the future that they were seeing, not only for the financial industry, but overall for industries. What was the future that we were seeing? And I could see, that our people were beginning to realize how far back we were and where we needed to go. So, the agility, the nimbleness, the legacy systems that we all had that was sort of tying us down and not allowing us to innovate and go to market very quickly. So they began to realize all of these things. Subsequent to that offsite, I followed it up with a meeting in Bangalore where I had, this team that is mentored by Nandan. It's led by Sharad Sharma, called iSpirit. So they are a team of volunteers and they mentor startups. So I had them curate 8 startups, and those startups came and told their stories to us. And, I knew that at least in my top management, I had alignment. They had bought into the story. They realized, what could be achieved. But when I got back into my office, I realized that just getting the top management aligned is not enough. You have to get the people at the bottom, right from the bottom of the pyramid. They need to understand that this is a different kind of a story that's going to be there altogether. So I did something which is very counterintuitive. In the sense, I decided that we will create 7 branches and they will look entirely different, totally different. So, I was talking about the virtual space, but I was creating branches. So totally counterintuitive, and people began questioning. So I said, no, this is the only way. Unless people see it, they won't understand it. So what we did was we took space in some of the biggest malls in 7 centers, including Bangalore and all of the metros, 7 branches. And we created branches that looked absolutely futuristic. So, the color decor was different. You walked into a place which was something like an alcove, which could be open 24/7. And you had an ATM, you had a cash deposit machine, you had a passbook printer, you had a multifunction kiosk. This could be separated from the main branch. And as you go into the branch, there would be huge screens on which you could do all kinds of things. You could look for loans, you could do virtual walk-ins, you could do all kinds of stuff over there. There were these smart tables, that looked something like out of Star Trek, where you could actually put in your investment goals and, do a lot of stuff there. Similarly, there were cubicles with, experts sitting on the other side of the screen, and you had 2 screens. So, the experts could tell you about loans, could tell you about investments, and they could send material on the other printer so that, you could actually get those papers and then, look at it. And if necessary, ask for in principle approvals and stuff like that. So I created these branches in malls specifically because I wanted people to visit it along with their families. I wanted people to come and experience what a branch of the future could look like.
Nice.
Okay. And I wanted them to understand how different digital is from what they had till now. Okay. And I think, that did make a difference. The perception that was there, that we were a staid, as you said, a staid bank, steeped in old values and very rigid systems, that perception began to change amongst the public. And first of all, amongst my own employees. They were curious, what is this that's coming up? So they went and had a look, they took their families, they played around on the screens. So, I think it is important to get that buy-in. Once you have that buy-in, thereafter doing the transformation is far, far easier.
And that's interesting, right? Nothing like show and tell.
Yeah.
Whether you're selling a toy to a 5-year-old or you're selling digital transformation to folks at a bank, show and tell never lets you down.
Yeah.
So that's a brilliant story, Arundhati. We are now in a different world, right? We started, the digital journey, of course, started in the pre-COVID era. And, the large transformation started taking place then. But then this huge tidal wave has hit mankind, right? And everything's changed. You were asking me how I traveled in from the US, right? A simple journey from San Jose to Mumbai now feels like a big deal. Our customers are dealing with, the post-COVID or, the COVID era. We are still in the COVID era. What would be your advice to them? What are the opportunities that they could harness to really come out winners through this time?
So, they really and truly, I think, have to show entrepreneurial grit in the face of these problems. These problems are not stuff that will go away. We used to talk in these conferences about the VUCA world. We are in a VUCA event, okay? But this is not the only one that India has faced. In fact, I think India, more than most other countries, has faced a number of these events. And I would say probably the demonetization was one of them. If you remember the demonetization, in a matter of 4 hours, 86% of the currency by value in circulation in an economy that was 12% GDP was in cash, got invalidated. Okay. And yet people managed through that entire period people innovated, they managed, they continued with their businesses. So the fact remains that, we have to be resourceful as to how we tackle these events. And each one of them is going to be an entirely different scenario. I remember again in the bank, we used to do these very thick documents about risk scenarios and diligently go through them in the board risk committees, okay, to see that we were prepared for all of these scenarios. And if I remember right, we had about 62 of them. And the pandemic is the 63rd. The demonetization probably is the 64th. We never ever imagined these things, though the pandemic had been called out, by the way. So from 2010, people had been warning us that something like this could hit the world. We just simply chose to, there is a suspension of disbelief kind of thing. And so we just chose to ignore it. Now, the fact is that once you are in it, we know now that, there will be many more such.
Correct.
And therefore, I think what is required at these times of stress is to determine what exactly you need to do. One, of course, is that you need to be able to access all of your systems and your business from anywhere. So work from anywhere is now a given. Second, you can never, ever lose your customer. So, this driving apart of the customers, I think, is something that really shook people up. And that is why you're seeing so much interest in things like e-commerce, because while the e-commerce platforms are all available, at that point of time, it was of no use. In fact, it was the neighborhood shop that had your phone number who could actually send you WhatsApp and the list of stuff he had and which he could deliver to you that actually did the business. So what you have realized is, you need multiple channels of interfacing with your customer so that you're never again driven apart, so that you're able to give the customer a choice as to whether he goes physical or digital or phygital, whichever way you call it. So I think, these are new realizations that industry is having. Similarly, regarding your supply channels, people may be having demand, but they're still not able to manufacture. Why? Because the supply channel is somewhere or the other disrupted. So you need multiple ways, you need redundancies built into the whole system. Okay. So there is so much that people have realized during this period of time, that you need to deliver experiences, sometimes physically, sometimes digitally, sometimes in a hybrid manner. You need to have the supply channels properly set up. Your dealer network, you should never be out of touch with them. Somebody else will snap them up if you're just not available. So, all of this connectedness that we had and which was taken for granted is now something people are realizing they have to build redundancies for. And all of these can only happen when you get into a digital transformation mode. Otherwise, it's very difficult. Digital transformation is what can bring you a single view of your customer, because your customer has so many points of interaction with you. Who brings it all together and gives you a 360-degree view of the customer? It's the the platform. So, we currently, as you know, Salesforce is going with the customer 360 story, because we believe that is actually a very, very important point that we need to sort of underline. You must have that connectivity with your people and with your customers in order to continue with the business to survive and then grow and thrive.
So very, very well said, Arundhati. And I think a lot of points that you have referred here were so meaningful. I think the biggest takeaway is we do need to have omni-channel interfaces with customers. We need to be able to have a customer 360, because you're right. We've all realized customer is paramount, and losing customers through COVID has given a realization that servicing customers is going to need a lot more agility and a lot of digital awareness in the way we conduct business. So well said. The other thing that I'm really passionate about, so is Salesforce. I've actually been a part of Mark Bini of some of the conversations around sustainability, right? Huge opportunity for India. You have a big voice on the Indian corporate stage. And considering that India has a lot of work to do ahead of it on sustainability and sustainable manufacturing, Salesforce is so fully committed to the planet. What would you foresee as opportunities? Because we also know that sustainability is creating jobs. India is committed to creating green jobs. Uh, how do you see this part of the world building itself out?
So, one thing we have to understand is that India is, at this point of time, our per capita consumption of energy is very, very low. In some places, it's like sub Saharan Africa. Maybe even they are better off in certain ways. So, unless and until we create ways of ensuring that we have far more usage of renewable power, and we do it in a manner that there is grid parity of prices, it's going to be very, very difficult for us to really enhance productivity and ensure that we are able to raise the standard of living for people. The second thing that we need to understand is that we have to ensure far better, cleaner water bodies, waterways, and the kind of usage that we have made of our land, which has actually resulted in the silting up of so many of our the water bodies and waterways. These are not the right and the sustainable ways of doing things. We have to be conscious of the fact that every drop of resource is something that we are using, but we should not be misusing it. If you look at the Indo-Gangetic belt, there is a reason why civilization is so old here. It's because the water is available at a very it's very close to the surface, and the second thing is that the land is really and truly fertile. But how have we taken care of it? Have we been custodians of this land? Means, again, during my exposure to banking, I have seen places where, for instance, the sugarcane farmers would simply switch on the pumps in the night and go to sleep, and use flood irrigation methods. Now, with flood irrigation, what happens is you're not paying for the power, so you're not bothered. But what is happening is your topsoil is getting washed away. It's getting washed away into the water bodies and silting them up. The fertilizer you're using is 4 times what you actually need to use. And that fertilizer is also going into the water bodies, creating things like water hyacinth and other weeds that again choke the water bodies. Now, the net result is your land is getting degraded, your water bodies are getting silted up, your actual, the water table is actually sinking, and you're using far more stuff, far more resources and fertilizers than you actually need to use. Now, all of these are unsustainable. What you really need to do for that kind of farming is just drip farming, where you deliver the minimum amount of water that's required right at the root, along with the minimum amount of fertilizer. That preserves everything. But we are not really investing in these sort of things. Similarly with tree plantations, there are ways and ways of doing tree plantations so that they sustain the people who are making those plantations. So it can be trees that are actually used very profitably. For instance, there is one foundation in one of the companies where I'm on the board. What they do is they look after these villages that are in the reserve areas, that is just outside the forest reserve areas. Now, these villagers often lose their crops because of wild animals that come and eat them up. Now, what they have taught these villagers is to create a fence by planting lemon trees. Now, lemon trees have thorns, okay? Plus, the smell is something that puts wild animals off. On top of that, you get the lemon fruit that you can actually sell. So, you are doing 2 or 3 things at the same time. So, there are very many initiatives that are going on in India. We probably need to bring them all sort of to some joint table and take the action forward in a manner that, it is more easily understood by others, replicable in other situations, and then, really put our minds and hearts that all businesses must ensure that they are sustainable businesses, that they are doing enough for the community, and they are doing enough in order to save the country and the planet.
So lots to do on sustainability, and it's great to see Salesforce commitment with Sustainability Cloud being launched.
Yes.
So huge opportunity for Indian manufacturers to jump on the Sustainability Cloud and use it as a way to track their carbon footprints as well. So Arundhati, sustainability brings us to diversity. We've just celebrated International Women's Day, and we know that there is a lot of headroom for women in India to do better in the corporate workplace, right? Some of us have been blessed because we've had the right education, the right mentors, and the opportunities to do well. What would be your advice to corporations in terms of ensuring a better gender mix, especially in their management teams?
So, in Salesforce, the gentleman who was heading our equality task force, okay, he's now become the chief recruitment officer as well. Okay. So again, you need to walk the talk in these matters. It's all good to have these values, but are we really and truly walking the talk? Okay. And if we are looking at gender diversity or any kind of diversity, actually, the effort has to start at the beginning, especially in these areas of, in these areas of IT and things like that. Actually, the number of people that can be recruited itself, of the female gender, that number itself is low, because somehow or the other, STEM education is not something that is, very well sort of represented by women right from their school days. Okay. And there are various reasons for it. Again, I used to work with an NGO in Bangalore called Agastya Foundation. And they are a foundation that actually goes about promoting STEM education. So they have these mobile vans which have all of these experiments, which they go and set up in schools, and which don't have science labs, and teach the students how to do all of these experiments, bring science to life for them. And because we were participating with them, they took me to one of these municipal schools in Mumbai. School itself was quite nice, actually, even though it was a municipal school, very spick and span, quite clean. And they were teaching these things. My only, I got a little astonished by the fact that in a class of about 35, there were only 7 or 8 boys. The rest were all girls. And I thought maybe this is an aberration, means this is not the gender divide in India. So how is it that this class has so many girls? So maybe this is an aberration. Let me look into another classroom. And I find the same thing happening there. So then, after the class was over, I called 2 of these girls and I asked them, do you have brothers? So they said, yes. So I said, where do they go? Where do they study? In the private schools. So look at the way the whole gender divide is working. So the private schools have better facilities. So the boys are being sent there. The girls, on the other hand, are being sent to the municipal schools, where obviously, the facilities are lower, the pedagogy is lower. Now, that really saddened me. It truly saddened me, because I had seen the enthusiasm of these girls when these experiments were going on, real shining eyes, hands shooting up, them really jumping in their desks and stuff like that, their chairs and things like that. So, but when I came back home, I sort of thought that, look, you can always look at a glass which is half empty or half full. 10 years back, these girls wouldn't have been in school at all. They'd have been looking after their younger siblings.
Yeah,
at least they're now in school.
That's
so, over a period of time, they will get to the private schools as well. But in the meanwhile, what do we do in order to improve the pedagogy in these schools? What do we do in order to ensure that they are getting the right opportunities? So I think, it is something which will take a period of time to get the true gender diversity there. If you ask me about SBI, the first woman probationer to join SBI was in 1960. So it took us, all of 53 years to get to the C-suite. Okay. So it takes time for anything to happen. In the meanwhile, what can we do to help? What can we do in order to really walk the talk, make it something which is measurable and monitorable, give it as a KPA so that people really, understand that this is something that has to be performed. And of course, ensure that uh, the talent pipeline, that we try and improve that pipeline so that more and more women can get into these kinds of jobs.
That's such a fascinating story about the municipal schools. I could not have seen the end coming. It's interesting that the girls still continue to get compromised, although we've seen academically women perform and do so much better than men, right? So it is a competitive academic world, and we remain hopeful that things continue to change. You actually made that reference. I must share with you. I just learned a couple of days back that my mother was one of the first officers at ONGC.
Okay.
She joined ONGC in 1966, and she would actually go to the oil rigs. But if you just think of the pace of evolution that has taken place, it took until 1966, perhaps, for women to be considered employable by organizations such as those. You and I continue to be optimistic,
Yeah,
and hopefully we will see a lot more women stepping up into the manufacturing sector, because we have a lot of our manufacturing customers here, and we look to their support. So fascinating conversation, Arundhati. I will actually hand this back to Baishakhi. Thank you so much for making the time today.
Not at all. You're most welcome. I enjoyed the conversation with you.
Thank you, Ms. Bhattacharya and Ms. Kapoor, for such an engaging session and for starting off today's session on such a high note. With this, we'll move on to our next session. So next we have Nilesh Oti, Global Head Manufacturing Vertical of Tech Mahindra, who is going to present on Tech and Manufacturing Future of Experience. Mr. Oti comes with over 23 years of experience and has worked with organizations like IBM, NTT Data, and TVS Suzuki before joining Tech Mahindra in 2014. At Tech Mahindra, he is responsible for the growth of the manufacturing industry unit and digital transformation solutions. He focuses on building digital COEs, solution labs, alliances, and sales. With that, over to you, Mr. Oti.
Thanks, Baishakhi. And from a very talent-filled and engaging discussion, thanks Charu and thanks Arundhati. From that, I'm going to bring you to the very rustic world of manufacturing. We have seen, the experience playing a big role in the banking, in the retail, in the travel kind of a segment. Today, during my discussion, during the next panel discussion, we are going to look at how the experience is playing in the future of manufacturing. Obviously, in the auto kind of a segment, it has already started playing a role. But we are seeing some of the very drastic thing happening even in the areas like the metal and mining, and in the chemical plant and things like that. So me and along with my all the panel members will take that discussion. Now before I get into the panel discussion, maybe I'm just going to take a couple of slides just to put my point of view and share in terms of what's happening in the manufacturing world. I'll try set the context and then we'll get into the panel discussion. So the future of experience in manufacturing, and when I look at some of the kind of a client, some of the kind of a customer we are handling both in India as well as in the outside part of the world, or some of the multinationals who are having their operations in India, what we see is that the post-pandemic era, some of the strategic direction of customer is really setting and defining the purpose of why we are in this business. And if I want to quote a few examples, like in the auto or in the retail kind of a segment, redefining the whole auto retail, redefining the whole auto omni channel. What our own the group company is trying to do is from just a B2B OEM to the dealer kind of a segment, where now they are going touching directly to the customer with the help of a data, and that's a new definition of an experience is happening. Or if I look at in the industrial segment now, a very hardware centric kind of a the manufacturing over there, but in the recent time a huge focus in terms of building the software, because what they believe is how they are going to create the experience for their product. Or even if I look at some of the segment like the chemical or mining now, where they are getting into the verborn strategy for the backward forward integration, the sustainability is playing a big role. I think the topic, Charu, what you touched upon with Arundhati on the SFDC side of it, in the new EV world, the whole of a mobility, building the mobility without compromise. Again, the sustainability is a big time kind of coming over there. So the whole of a sustainability and experience is again playing a role. When we looked at the auto, aero, and defense kind of a segment, we saw that there is a subtle shift from the commercial aircraft more towards the defense side of a business because of the current situation and how some of these companies are building their resilient operations. So on the operation side of it is the another part of the experience which is playing, or some of the new age companies, who are building the social system where they are, bringing the everything is intricately interwoven, the product as well as from the customer perspective and all. So in this part of the world, when we look at how there is a natural progression is happening of the technology, and then the challenge in terms of the adoption of that. So how the adoption is kind of taking and evolving, and I think that is where the experience, the X, is playing a big role over here, be it on the customer experience side of it, be it is the service experience or the physical experience of your dealerships or the product, or be it the operations experience, or be it using of the data, to take and create some of the decisions. So the data experience side of it, I think today in manufacturing, be it a design engineer or a production engineer or a procurement guy or a sales guy or HR or a finance person, I think the human centered experience is one of the big thing, the big change what we are seeing in the industry. That's where Techim is also taking its big bet, investing some of our solutions in this area. So that's a quick context setting. And Baishakhi, back to you as you take it ahead on your the next panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oti, for putting things into perspective. It was a quick, insightful session highlighting the importance of technology in manufacturing. Industry 4.0 is all about digital experiences and the best use of technology to drive better manufacturing. As efficiency becomes the center of focus, data and technology becomes vital to build smart, sustainable manufacturing flows optimized for the future. With this in context, we head into our next session where we have a panel discussion to delve into some pertinent topics related to manufacturing. In this panel, we will be having some insightful discussion on digital experiences, Industry 4.0, and data-driven organizational agility. And for this, I would like to invite our esteemed panelists. So first, we have with us Rajkumar Ravuri, Director, Industry Strategy, Manufacturing, Salesforce. Next, we have Mohit Kapoor, Group Chief Technology Officer, Mahindra Group. Our third panelist is Christian Decker, Partner Smart Manufacturing Lead, EMEA ISG. Last but definitely not the least, again, Mr. Nitesh Oti, Global Head Manufacturing Vertical, Tech Mahindra. Welcome, panelists. So without any further delay, we'll start off with our panel discussion. So my first question is for Christian. It is well recognized now that COVID-19 has been a major transformation driver across industries and geographies. You have a global view of how the manufacturing industry is changing. In the audience today, we have leaders from auto, process, and discrete businesses from India. So could you please share your views on new business models and how are global players responding to it?
Yeah, thank you, and welcome everybody. Good afternoon. Greetings from Munich in Germany. So let me start with a simple formula, a simplified formula, probably even. So what I would say, a business model today is consisting of smart product plus smart service plus new experiences. I guess this very well relates also to what just Nilesh was presenting in the end. It's all about also the inclusion of experience. So while and just to reflect on the COVID impact, while this formula remains the same, and it was the same before COVID, I guess COVID did a great job in speeding up and widening the gap between the winners and those where the business models are even more at risk, and that took other investment decisions. We saw in surveys that, let's say, 80% of executives think that their business models are at risk. I usually say then, okay, then show me the investments you've done in digital spend over the last 3 years, and you clearly can see where the difference is in those who are doing better and worse. Yeah. Of course, it plays a role which sector you're in. So also we have a huge semiconductor crisis at the moment across the globe. But in the end, what we saw those who did just only incremental or efficiency-driven initiatives, and those who did not translate their digital transformation journey into also an organization-wide new operating model and really change the way of doing things. They were not really adopting to new business models and were not really successful. So coming to a second point, especially in Europe, we see a lot of push into inclusive or cooperation-driven business models that are coming up. So take cooperations between BMW and FCA for their autonomous driving product development. Or we have a smart factory KUKA is doing jointly with their robotics or a robot-based automated solutions. MHP comes in to provide the systems integration, and an insurer cross-industry comes in and provides risk coverage and manages innovative financial models. We see some big movement on industrial cloud where VW partnered with AWS and Siemens. We have an open manufacturing platform where BMW again partnered with Microsoft and ZF as well as Bosch. And especially the small and medium businesses is stepping up and joined hands for the example of the Adamos IoT platform. So those are great examples where cooperation and inclusive business models are really driving the new way of thinking. However, and that's the final statements on this take for business models. Let's go about from platforms and data-driven topics. If you're not able to translate the business models into really an integrated IT, OT, and I would even add engineering technology, IET operating model, you break silos and you're going across those former typical setups of organizations, you will not be as successful, let's say that way, as those who already started to do this. And final sentence for also a trend we are seeing at the moment at the market, reshoring in times where supply chains were really disrupted, especially in manufacturing. A smart reshoring for, let's say, high mix, low volume productions is really something to be considered across the globe and for every manufacturer.
Thanks, Christian. So the next question goes out to Mohit. So you must already be seeing this transformation in the industry today. It has also been said that one of your core agenda is to leverage new and emerging technologies to create business models and transform customer experiences across Mahindra's group diverse set of companies. So could you please share your experience with us, and also where do you think companies should be investing their resources?
Thanks, Baishakhi. I'm very happy to be here. In fact, when Christian was talking about smart product, smart service, I think he forgot the smart customer, which I wanted to bring to the table. I think while we were on our own accelerated pace of modernizing the digital approach, it is the customer journeys which is setting the pace now. And the customer is setting the bar right up there. And we have to meet the bar and maybe exceed the bar. So the way we see it across the group, in the auto and the farm sectors, also in our real estate sector, in the holiday side, used cars and finance, I think we are a conglomerate and various companies. The way we see most of the transformation is customer journey orientation, where we need to see how to drive a delightful customer experience through the journey. And let me just take one example of buying a car, and very conventional models of coming to dealerships to buy a car, or even real estate, buying a house, was very on-site model. All of those, because of the last 1 year, are possible digitally and need to be reinvented and remanifested in many ways. So that's where we are prioritizing our time. So if I were to kind of summarize the 4 things we have to do very well. One is to digitize the customer journey so that it's delightful, joyful, saves time for the customer, is value added, gives the customer the choice, the ability to drive customization, to be predictable, and to be transparent. And that takes a lot, because many of those in the conventional model at a dealership or at a branch or a shop or in the office comes through conversation. And in the digital avatar of this, it's hard to do, but how do we do a stellar job on doing it? So that's one area with specializing in or going deeper into. Second is data, and I think Christian and Nilesh both talked about it earlier. A lot of this has to be backed with data, where you have to be able to predict rather than carpet bombing options to the customers. You have to almost know when and where and how and at what price can the customer want something, and hence how do you do A/B testing and use data to make the right decisions. That's kind of second. Third is a lot around modernizing and using the cloud. I think the fellow panelists spoke about it. The cloud is a good accelerator, and what would have taken many years, we can do a lot better and a lot faster with the help of the cloud, and build APIs and be able to connect other ecosystem partners and players, whether they're suppliers, vendors, and other partnership companies. And fourth, which for us is very important, and I'm sure for other companies as well, is the cybersecurity angle of it. That with more things going more digital, while OT was very stepbrotherly earlier, it's now as important as IT, because a cybersecurity event at the OT side could very well hijack the IT side and really have a large scale outage. So that's kind of the fourth priority. In terms of business models, we see many of those evolving. Rather than buying cars, subscription models, leasing models, part-time car ownership models, many of those are coming on the auto side, but not limited to auto. And hence we have to continuously reinvent. What I'm saying is kind of more in continuum and a forever journey, more or less, to keep improving it rather than a destination we're trying to get to. But it's very exciting. And as far as we are measurably progressing and improving ourselves through each stage of the customer journey, we're heading in the right direction. So with that, I'll kind of pause and let other panelists talk about similar aspects of the story.
Great, thank you, Mohit. So the next question is open to all the panelists. While the COVID climatic changes continue to persist in today's world, manufacturers are driven towards alternative business models to drive revenue and growth. So what are some of the emerging business models in today's manufacturing industry to drive growth?
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me on this panel. I think it's team panel. Some great thoughts and insights upfront from Arundhati and Charu as well. So to answer your question, right, I think we've heard some great insights from Christian and Mohit just a moment ago. So manufacturers clearly, are not one shape that or one size that fits all. So you have manufacturers who produce different sorts of goods and products, whether they're discrete manufacturers making cars or machinery, or you have the process manufacturers of chemicals, building materials, cement, etc. Right? I think the way they route their products and go to market, whether they are dependent on other B2B distributors, wholesalers, or dealers, or the auto and other such companies with strong B2C presence, either through marketing and digital footprint, they're wanting to get closer to the customers because of all of the digital footprint and eyeballs and ability to catch that customer while they're browsing and researching online. So I think the business models that manufacturers are starting to look at is that the convergence of all of the COVID-driven digital experiences that manufacturers are investing in to not only provide digital trusted experiences to make the internal employees be more productive, but also make their business partners, such as dealer distributors, to be more collaborative and more productive and be more profitable. But increasingly build that, customer advocacy and long-term lifetime relationship with end customers. At the crux of this is where all of the data that manufacturers are collecting across all of these channels and devices of interaction is what is making their internal processes more streamlined, and ability to drive insights and intelligence so that the decision making across all of these functions across the workflows can be automated as much as possible. And that's exactly where new business models emerging. And clearly with a cloud and a platform driven approach, manufacturers are starting to experiment, start small and scale it up fast, right? I think that's where, just to give you an example, a leading industrial chemicals and adhesives manufacturer in India, Pidilite Industries, that all of you are familiar with, like Fevicol, etc. So they were already a customer on Salesforce platform, championing all of the digital transformation agenda. But when the COVID lockdown hit, they wanted to reach out to all of their end customers who were at home and wanting to do home repairs, but they also were dependent on tens and thousands of construction, other such plumbers and other influencers. And influencers were already getting onboarded on our platform. But what ultimately, improved the overall utilization, they deployed a mobile app. In a matter of days, influencers were able to call on their customers through WhatsApp and other channels to engage the customers, guide them on what home repairs would be required, all in the confines of the repairer carpenter is at home, the customer is in their own home, and the Pidilite website and the platform is fully available on a digital platform. I think the new business models that we're talking about is about understanding how your products are resonating with customers, where you can address the white spaces and untapped market opportunities and leverage the data that you collect. And with the insights that you gather, what are those new channels, new profitable services and solutions that manufacturers can deploy?
That was insightful, Raj. And I have another question for you. So you have already mentioned about data and you have already cited the example of Pidilite. So talking the same line, as we all know that data is the heart of every business and a core driver of digital experiences. And no doubt Salesforce has been a major proponent of it. So could you please share a bit more views on how Salesforce is helping businesses in these aspects, especially with the emerging business models?
Sure, Baishakhi. Thanks for the opportunity. So again, I think to continue from the earlier talk track I just spoke a couple of minutes ago, I think manufacturing is a complex industry. There are several other industries which are also large and global, but for manufacturers, from the time they define that they want to design a new product that is meeting an untapped demand, it's a long lead time between defining the months of engineering and R&D work to manufacturing and then getting to the supply chain, ultimately to dealer, distributors, and customers, right? So clearly, while manufacturers are invested in pivoting to this post-COVID world, work from anywhere, all digital sort of world, I think the challenge they face is what is the right approach to get there, right? And clearly, they don't want to invest in long-term programs where the line of sight is maybe 12 or 18 months out. And clearly, you need an agile way of working and ability to embrace the business partners who, in your case, let's say a large manufacturer who hitherto was always B2B focused, they need the insights of where customers are and how are the customers resonating with these changes in the products and the demands themselves. And that's exactly where the data combined with the business models is where manufacturers who can not only double down on digital marketing strategies and gather the customer profile data, and also figuring out those unique customer segments with that hyper personalized sort of experiences is where the Salesforce platform and with our partners such as Tech Mahindra are enabling this innovation for our customers.
Interesting insights. On that note, I have a question for Nilesh. So, as we all know that investing in the right technology is only the first step. The real success, however, comes in successfully adopting it and most importantly, in a timely manner. So, could you please share your thoughts on data-driven agility and connected experiences in this context?
Maybe to answer that, I'll try share two, the short stories of what happened in the recent time in a real practical sort of an environment. So it was a factory, the shop floor where the great technologies like the digital twin, digital thread is what we deployed. It was collecting the data from the machine, and then it was like showing some parameters and all that. But then we saw that the adoption was not so high. The workers, the maintenance guy, they were not really using that data. And typically then the answer was that, no, hey, I'm on this shop floor for the last 20-25 years. If there is something wrong with the electric motor, or if there is something wrong with the meshing of the gear, just by the sound of it, we will know what it is. Why do I need a technology? Why do I need a data to show me in terms of, why this has been happening? We clearly saw that, okay, there was a challenge in terms of the adoption. We thought let's play a different game with the experience, and on the shop floor then we kind of put a game. So we just gamified that whole data, and then we said that, okay, now on the shop floor, whoever find and tell us that when the motor will fail possibly, and whoever will tell us first will get some award. And it was like a typical the Japanese environment, we call it as a TQC problem. So we kind of floated that the game on the shop floor. Very interestingly, the same guys, then we saw that the adoption of technology, it became so quick. The guys immediately started looking at data. They immediately started looking in terms of how the parameters of the electric motor, the vibration, the sensors, whatever it was giving, and then they interpreted to say that, okay, where and which possibly the motor may take and fail. You see the same data, the same technology, and suddenly the adoption changed when the experience kind of was brought on the table. a similar kind of another interesting case happened very recently after the post pandemic, where we were connecting some of the automobile dealers and the front line of the service field service guys. We brought the technologies of the AR, VR, mixed reality. We thought that to the frontline people, we will help that when they do a car service. And today's car, especially anything to do with the electrical circuit wiring, anything to do with the infotainment system, are pretty complex problem. And not that everything the service guy will know, and maybe they will need help. So maybe somebody who is an expert sitting from the other side can interact and then can suggest in terms of what to do and how to do the first time right. A major resistance. I mean, the if you go to the field service community across the globe, the first and foremost is that hey, I am an expert, I know this, I can do the best car service and all that, and hence I am who I am, right? And sharing is just not there in this part of the world. They never did it in the last whatever the hundreds of years of the history of the car and when the service has been happening. But then again, like then we kind of bought this mixed reality into picture, and then there is this car which is getting launched now, and then the same car was launched in the Eastern Europe about 2 months back. And the guy, the field engineer over here, he understood that no, hey, something similar has happened in the Eastern Europe. Now he doesn't even know the name of that guy, but somebody coming from the different part of the world, somebody who has seen some different things and all, and through the mixed reality, through the network of future, they talking to each other and then sharing their experience. And then this guy was telling, said that okay, this circuit wiring, this is what the early stage kind of a problem can happen, and this is how you should take care and look at it. It is just that the problem solving happened in 2 minutes, and for the 5 minutes these guys were talking more from the culture point of view, and they were talking in terms of how my customer in Czech Republic is been taking and then behaving with this car, and how your customer over there in Sholapur is taking and behaving with your car, and what need to be done. It was a pretty fantastic experience. Like the technology actually brought the experience, brought the two cultures, the mix of it on table, and at the same time, the exchange of the problem, the exchange of the diagnostic, it also kind of happened through the mixed reality. I think those are some of the the beautiful stories of the adoption taking and happening. So I clearly see that while the data, the technology will bring a lot of solutions on table, but from the adoption perspective, a very different experience, the human centric experience, the gamification centric I mean, those are the things which will make it really a successful in terms of how the problems are getting solved.
Great, Nilesh. So this leads to my next question, which is for all the panelists. So picking up from where Nilesh left. So driving business decisions based on data and designing digital journeys which are data driven is definitely crucial for a successful organizational agility. So what are your views? Like if Mohit or Christian wants to take this question up.
Yeah, let me take it up with Nilesh was letting off, and this also corresponds to maybe one question on the Q&A chat as well. I just read. So I think not just the customer journeys I was speaking about, where using data we can predict what the customer may want, where she may want it, at what price. Not just that, within our plants, and I think Nilesh was talking about that a bit. Within our plants, we've been in the last 1 year scaling up a lot of experiments using data science, and have been able to come to high predictability on engine failure. So if you had to do load testing on engines, soak testing and burn testing, all kind of testing on the engine before they can go in the car and go on the street. And hence, as a QC process, using data science and sensors and IoTs, we are able to predict, and that saved a lot of productivity hours on the engine. I think earlier, Nilesh, we were talking about paint shops and painting. So at the Mahindra Group in the auto side, it has already been implemented, where hundreds of nozzles and viscosity of the paint, temperature of the paint shop, many of those parameters are tuned, monitored, and finally put together so that you are able to have a best quality paint job on a car going out of the paint shop, so that there is no repainting, because it leads to lack of productivity. And then many other similar examples on IoT. And I think from supply chain innovation, whether it's inbound supply chain, outbound supply chain, I think with 5G and some of those coming up, this will get accelerated further. Whether it's a connected car leading to level 1 autonomy, with 5G, we'll have a different dimension in terms of edge computing and intelligence, which is already kind of being done on 4G or 3G, but it'll have a different meaning. Not there that we are there yet, but that's part of the vision. A few other examples which come to my mind, which are real, is from our farm segment. That connected tractors is something we're investing in, which is that each tractor we can do telemetry on it, where from a phone app, the farmer is able to see if the tractor is rented out or is being driven by somebody else. It can track, give you a lot of data around efficiency, performance, preventive maintenance, many of those things. So connected tractor is something we're doing. Similarly, working with a lot of farmers and farmland in hundreds of thousands of acres on looking at computer vision for pesticide spraying in sugarcane farming. That rather than just spraying willy-nilly all over, how do we use computer vision so that you spray only where the rust or where the pesticide impact is, or pest impact is, so that you can spray pesticide only there, so that the general health of the crop is still good. Putting IoT sensor in the soil for irrigation. I think Arundhati was talking about flood irrigation versus drip irrigation. So many of these examples, either are in the experimentation or scale up, or in highly productive hyper expansion stage already, which I think are other examples of driving using data, cloud, and IoT and tech for making a big difference on business models beyond the customer-led transformation, which has to be done anyways. So over to you, Christian, for your view.
And well said. And then let me try this. What I heard from Nilesh, Raj, and you. Let me bring that to some patterns I see. Also, then leading to the question, which is basically going around data. But so the first thing is, often we see companies are driving their innovation and their digital transformation based on technology and possibilities of technology, rather than, as you were rightly mentioning, coming from the customer experience point of view and the real use cases. So what we really see where successful implementations work, and I love the examples from Nilesh and from Raj, where you say, make it real for the people who has to use and to adopt to the technology, then you have use cases. The second pattern I see is engineers and productioners typically have to get used to that they're not only manufacturing something and sell it and then it's out of the house. It's being serviced, it's being maintained, and it's all going virtually. And with the use of technology, there's a new dimension that's coming in, and it's scaling out. So this is the last point. We see all kinds of proof of concepts and technologies used for little small pieces, but once it comes to scalable operations in the life cycle, I would say the only ones that they were used the past years to use this and to know this and to balance it was IT. IT is used to have large scale operations. ET and OT very fragmented and very slow and not in the at scale, especially not at the interface of customers. Like automotive, they did not even know their customers because they knew the numbers of their cars, but not who is driving it. So why would you then come up with digital additional smart services, smart products, if you only know your car and the platform that is driving there around, but not the user of it? And I would say, because we're all talking, COVID really made a huge difference. This business model disruption and this impact was there before. It's not that COVID, as I said, it's just speeding up, but the pressure is now even further as the physical interaction was limited, the physical issues in the product and plants was limited. So now they have to really give it a drive and catch up with those Teslas of this world who did this thing right in the beginning and coming from the customer point of view. And final topic on the data, also here, use case driven, connecting not only the data, but really making the best use of different sources of data, and also dealing with historical data from old machines and not the brand new IoT sensors, but really having the stuff that is there and trying to combine the data for and lining it on use cases that is what we see is really driving the success at the moment.
Those were some great facts. In fact, Christian, my next question for you would be, how far is the manufacturing industry in terms of adopting modern day technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, or be it AR, VR as of today? What's your view on that?
So I try to be quick, and then I'm very interested in also the other panelists' opinion on this one, because I took a long answer just right now. But I would still say technology is not the issue. The issue is business model, is use case, is really not only putting a technology in place, but combining it with gamification, combining it with really outcome services, outcome-based thinking and services that really scale. What we see across the board globally, and especially in EMEA, everything is in proof of concept state. There is not yet, I would say, multiple use cases that are really working at scale, unfortunately. And this has also to do with an internal rethinking of how would we internally adopt to new technology and thinking, which means break the silos. And there is not the classical enterprise IT, the engineering IT, and the OT that has to work more vertically based on smart products, smart services, and going across the entire organization, and then also combine the agility thinking and patterns you were just mentioning before, Nilesh and Raj. So
great. So in that context, Mohit, I would like to ask you, how do you see the Indian manufacturing industries adopting AI, ML, AR, and VR?
Lot to be done, or it's under leveraged capability in my view, and that's why I was quoting some examples on the data science and machine learning of things we have done. IoT and 5G, I think, will catch up because supply chain is everybody's invested project, and IoTs and 5G will really, help in that journey. So I think on your original question, which you asked Christian as well, for us at least, and maybe true for Indian companies, if you are able to connect it to either revenue gains or share of the wallet or customer engagement or customer experience or risk reduction or better quality quite directly, then those experiments run quite well because you have the full buy-in and funding and investment. If it's purely experimental in trying out new things, then not necessarily they get the prioritization. So your question on the Indian industry or Indian manufacturing industry, prioritizing use of IT, as far as the use of IT can directly help sell more or reduce the cost or drive continued customer satisfaction, I think it works well. And hence we are also quite directly, taking up those things on higher priority, which are aligned to many of these gains, so that it really helps, to the customer journey, goes back to what the customer wants. Otherwise, Christian is quite right that you can very happily be making cars forever without even knowing, not necessarily, how it impacts, the customer's life. So the front to back is very, very important. The integration of front to back is very, very important. So you have to look at it holistically, inbound and outbound both, as a supply chain, not just, the inbound coming into making the car, but outbound and how then it goes to the street. And lots of the work right from, marketing to sales to servicing is also important, because in automobiles, the after sales service actually makes the customer come for, the same brand again. Otherwise, it's a one-time sale. Many times, companies tend to overlook that fact. So the connected journey is, from marketing to sales and to after sales, to have it connected continued experience. All of that has to be thought through. Then what should be the instrumentation, data, and IT or digitization around it? If you can think of it all, then I think, and prioritize it, I think that's how it works. That's how it's working for us. It's not going to get solved fully, but if you have a 3-year plan and take the higher priority ones, I'm sure you will get there.
Thank you, Mohit and Christian. So with that, we move on to our last question of the panel discussion. And here's a follow-up question to Raj and Nilesh. So keeping in mind the information we just got from two of our panelists, so how can AI, ML, AR, or VR have a meaningful impact on Indian consumers? Any thoughts on accelerating this adoption further?
Yeah, sure. I think just want to build on what Mohit just said, right? So clearly, Baishakhi, what we've seen as a witness over the last 12 to 14 months of being, locked at home is while when we talk about consumers, clearly there's a definition of age, demographics, etc. But increasingly, the next generation who are teenagers and even younger children, they also have been exposed to what this COVID-related pandemic is all about and a future of all digital world. So clearly manufacturers, whether it is automobile manufacturers of cars and two-wheelers or other consumer electronics sort of manufacturers, they're increasingly tapping into AI as well as gamification led approaches to understand these digital kids who were born post 2000 in a completely all digital world, very, very savvy with devices and working on multiple devices, right? The AI is able to help these manufacturers to understand what sort of experiences the next generation customers would demand. And sometimes these next generation, the children or teenagers become increasingly influencers on their parents as they're getting ready to go to college or whatnot on some of the high value, high ticket purchases as well. And I think there are incredible use cases around the mixed reality, AR, VR, to bring those gamified experiences to those customers who always have lived and grown with the likes of Xbox or Sony PS5, etc. I think the manufacturers are starting to experiment that. And beyond that, it's also about the phygital part of it. It's increasingly becoming clearer that you don't want to keep expanding the retail showrooms and the retail footprint in expensive, cities at the center of the cities. Increasingly, it's all about where the customers are, whether the digital space or the physical space at the mall or wherever. How do you bring their experience into virtual kiosk? And at every one of these interactions and channels, AI and as well as gamified experience around mixed reality, AR, VR will play a huge role in understanding what's resonating, what features are resonating, what colors are resonating, and which are the products where you can, up the pricing and, drive higher margin and more profitable products. I think that's where manufacturers are starting to experiment. And India is one of the biggest markets out there with close to 600, 700 million people using mobile phones, smartphones, and also high-speed broadband bandwidth at home. I think we are seeing over the next few months and a couple of years, number of innovations coming out of in this space.
To answer, the question around manufacturing India, digital technology, and effectiveness, I'll just throw a few statistics across on the table. I think that can tell you in terms of how possibly it is going to evolve and the adoption in India is going to happen. Number one is if you take the productivity of per person in manufacturing. In Germany, it is more than $40,000. In China, it is more than $25,000. In India, it is less than $10,000, right? So you will see that at least 3 to 4 times is what is the productivity. The another side, if you look at, for example, the cost of quality, whether it is the factory side of the quality or whether it is aftermarket and warranty side of the quality, in many of the other Western world, it is less than 2% is the cost of quality. The India side of many manufacturing setup and all that, it goes more than 3.5% as the cost of quality. Now, the answer to all of that is not all that simple to say that, okay, now India is going to have all the robotics and automation and replace people and take that, because, the cost arbitrage advantage of India will remain over here in India. So India journey is going to be a far different when we take and adopt, the digital technologies and all that. The first and foremost, when it comes to the quality, the technologies like the AI, ML, pattern, ensuring that, the quality is being scanned properly and all that. I think those things will coexist along with the human to take and give that advantage to India. Now let's look at the next 5-7 years journey of India. Now when we talk about Make in India or when we talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat, the 3 segment will be on the forefront where the manufacturing and the growth will happen. The number one, our import bill of electronics is pretty high. So there is already a huge push in terms of the more and more electronic manufacturing happening in India. The second is all of us, we are already experiencing that the pharma segment is taking a forefront in terms of the more and more manufacturing happening over here. And the third area again where the big investment happening is in the defense segment. Now, all these 3 segments are very, very precision manufacturing, compliance driven kind of the segment. So you will see that the next part of the the setup of manufacturing. What the manufacturing has brought India over here so far, the last 30, 40 years, is not something which is going to happen in India for the next 10 or 15 years, right? So while these segment take and grow in India, we will see a complete different set of manufacturing, a very mix of the human plus the robot, what we call it as a cobot, the collaborative robot taking shape, and the collaborative technology of the human plus the digital taking shape in India. I don't see that we will go and copy the Western world in terms of having the manufacturing here. So that's a new human centric manufacturing is what we'll take and we'll see as we go ahead. If somebody want to take an example of how it looks and how it takes shape, we'll invite you. Please come and visit our Mahindra Chakan plant. It's a beautiful temple of Industry 4.0. Thanks.
Thank you, Raj and Nilesh. So, with that, we gained some amazing information from you all on the new age of manufacturing. Thank you, panelists, for deep diving into such a crucial topic and imparting such valuable takeaways. With that, we move on to our Q&A session, and we have time to quickly take up two questions from our audience. So, the first question is for Christian. And the question goes out: in the bigger picture of Industry 4.0, one of your focus area is the new ecosystem and marketplace. So how do you see that changing?
Yeah, I guess I did reflect on this in the very beginning. Very inclusive corporations coming up does not mean that the typical, and this is the biggest challenge we see in the manufacturing industry, the typical understanding of who is driving the demand and who is the client and who is a supplier rather than eye-level corporation partner. This is probably the biggest challenge to overcome, and I would say this is a typical German root behavior from the history. However, I see this changing. So ecosystems are going across completely vertical and horizontally. Vertically on the supply chain, but also horizontally on the supply chain, but vertically also across industries, where I had some examples on the business models before. I think without combining smartly cross-functional teams, working them on concrete use cases and business models in a joint manner and not doing it sequentially, and also finding the right balance between incentivization and creating win-win situations. This is one takeaway. The other thing is exchange on data. I think you're pretty well aware on some new initiatives coming up. Catena X is some interesting, let's say at least Europe thing they came up with based on the Gaia X project to exchange data across the industry. Automotive, SAP is with there. I did not see Salesforce there as well, but they are open for partnering and really driving exchange of data for the development of further business models and further topics and getting more insights. Yeah, so I would say the take on ecosystems is get rid of a typical supplier and client patterns you've been knowing in the past with service levels on contracts. Get to cooperation contracts and creating use case win-win situations.
Great. So our next and final question goes out for Raj. So the question is: being able to measure ROI is the key. How agile can this process be made?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question, Baishakhi. Thanks again. I think clearly we've talked a lot over the last hour or more on all the benefits around digital-led transformation. But clearly the purse strings that are controlled by the likes of the CFO and the board, they would want to understand how do we measure the ROI? And especially when the time to value has been compressed, as Christian rightly called out, digital transformation agenda has been around even before pre-COVID. But now it's all the imperative around how quickly can I get the benefits to internal and external stakeholders and sustain the growth so that I can continue to take market share. So when we look at the ROI, I think it starts from who are the key stakeholders, and are we driving an organization-wide transformation, which typically could span a couple of years or longer, versus now in the post-COVID, the digital-led era, we are advising customers, including with partners like Tech Mahindra, in taking a crawl, walk, run sort of approach, where manufacturers should look at which are the areas which are impeding your ability to compete in the marketplace and also embrace your ecosystem, either because of lack of adequate digital processes upfront. Now is the way to go about it. So measure not only just the adoption, but also in terms of ability for them to be successful from anywhere, which is about serving a larger customer base with a lower cost of customer acquisition, ability to bring down the customer servicing costs with automation and omni-channel 24/7 sort of a customer service, as well as ability to tap into all of the data that their partners and their own digital channels and footprint is giving them. How do you leverage those insights so that you can continue to serve not only on the product quality and warranty and other such issues, able to bring all of that, so that it's important to define ROIs for every function which are different, and whichever is the biggest bang for buck, which typically starts from growth agenda and profitable margins area. Those are the two we would advise first, which are CFO driven and maybe marketing and sales growth driven. Then come the productivity related. So each of these is able to measure the ROI on a set of use cases and set of key capabilities that you drive around weekly, monthly, and quarterly. So I think anything above a quarter-long initiative, we're no longer recommending, because clearly you will have to drive out this agenda in less than 12 weeks sort of a timeline.
Thank you, Raj. So with that, we come to the end of our panel discussion. And once again, thank you, panelists, for sharing such valuable insights with us. So moving on, now we have a presentation by Sunil Jairam, Global Head Salesforce Practice Tech Mahindra. Over to you, Mr. Jairam.
Thank you, Baishakhi. Thank you, everyone. It was an incredible 90 minutes listening to all the experts and panelists. It ranged from career choices to technology adoption, sustainability, and diversity, and ending with AI, ML, AR, and VR. Incredible conversation. And Arundhati also touched upon how she was in the midst of one of the largest digital transformation, implementing UPI in India, where real-time transactions connect 4 banks in real time for the millions and millions of users that we have in India. I think the consensus that I felt among all the panelists is, while things are complex to enable the next level of experience for the employees, partners, and consumers, the good thing is technology has arrived, right? There is nothing which is now impossible. The art of possible is now possible. The way the technology has evolved, and platforms like Salesforce with Customer 360 addressing all the marketing, sales, and service aspects of it, is now made it reach the use cases reachable. And in my own experience, spanning over 2 decades doing CRM and CX for our global clientele, I have seen how technology has been adopted and how some of these fascinating use cases has been deployed in multiple customers. The only caution is there are some industries like the telcos and banks, maybe they are in a much advanced transformation level compared to maybe manufacturing or other industries. But I think there's no stoppage of taking those learning from the other verticals and then applying it to manufacturing and other industries. So when I look at what really excites a consumer, as I mean, in my own case, being a consumer, what really excites us is if the OEM and manufacturer really acknowledges that multi-channel is a mandatory need for the current gen of consumers, right? I think the whole digital to phygital should be appreciated, should be enabled to make sure that whether I'm in channel A or channel B, my interactions are acknowledged and the response back to me is relevant based on the past transactions, right? I think phygital is mandatory. The second thing is, the more you're able to predict the reasons why I'm calling a call center or why I'm trying to buy a product or exploring your website for looking at some of the products, the more predictive you become, the more excited I become as a consumer. I'll probably give you some examples that we have enabled for some of our global clientele. I mean, I can think of a telecom in Canada where they said, so we have done the call center. Now, how do I delight my customer more? What can I use from the platforms that I have around, including Salesforce, the analytics platforms, and all of these platforms? How do I excite my customer more? So the way we went about addressing the problem is to do a digital design thinking workshop, bringing all the stakeholders together, and said, now let's start defining what the art of possibilities are, right? So a customer is calling you. What are the possible scenarios that he or she will be calling you? For example, if since they are a telco customer, If their bill is 20% more than the average, there is a potential reason for somebody to call the call center. And if they are calling, what are the X number of reasons the bill has gone above average? Can we deduce that using analytics? Can you deduce that looking at all the data, and then preempt the agent into the CRM to say that customer X will potentially call you for reason 1, 2, and 3. Reason 1 being you were in roaming, you were traveling in the last couple of months. That is the reason. Reason number 2, you've been using data for X number of more data usage than your past usage. So if we preempt the agent and make the agent sound more intelligent, that improves the customer delight. And similarly for the sales cycle, I mean, we can make the sales agents much more intelligent by guiding them which bundle sells more, what is the price range given the customer's demographics, which closes deals faster. You can accelerate the whole sales cycle by bringing some element of analytics into the CRM. Plus marketing, of course, there are n number of things that we can do with digital marketing today. Next best offers and platforms like Salesforce, Einstein, the capabilities are almost there where you don't really have to think technology anymore. All you have to think now is the business problems, what has to be solved, and then putting out a plan to solve them. And the technology is almost there to take you there. The other important thing is it has to be a top-down approach in enabling some of these next level of advancements. As Arundhati said, I mean, who would have imagined enabling UPI for a millions of customer base doing real-time transactions? So that vision should come from leaders like you in a top-down manner to lay out the vision so the engineers and stakeholders from business and IT can sit together, think and define what the business problems are and what are those art of possibilities that they want to achieve and how they can be very agile about enabling one after the other. So my recommendation is just put the lay of the vision out there for the engineers and stakeholders to come and solve it. And the last thing, I mean, being a technology partner, I mean, we are also very open and receptive to ideas that enabling art of possibility, it's not black and white. I think as a partner, as a business, as a product partner, I think we all should be receptive to the idea of coming together and defining a win-win partnership, saying, okay, let's work on this business problem and let's get remunerated based on the business outcomes that we can put onto the table. So, I mean, that is something that we as technology partners also are starting to elaborate, explore with our customers. I think in the interest of time, Baishakhi, I think maybe I'll pause here. And if there are any questions, I'll take. Thanks so much for organizing it extremely well. And thanks to all the panelists.
Thank you, Mr. Jairam, for such a crisp and interesting presentation. With that, may I now request Mr. Auty to deliver the thank you note?
Yeah, great. So I think, it's not a very common topic that, we take and discuss the experience in manufacturing. Till about a year back, it used to be more like, people will discuss the industry 4.0, AI, ML, AR, and things like that. I think very clearly the technology is coming to an age where the solutions are available. The adoption, the business benefit, the ROI are the topics on the table. And I think, if I look at today's last 1.5 hour, it was really a very insightful discussion. Many people coming, the panelists coming and giving their practical perspective in terms of what's happening. I think it's really very helpful for the Indian manufacturing industry and some of the participants which we had today. Thank you very much. Thank you to Economic Times. Thank you, our own Tech Mahindra and Mahindra Group team, as well as my partner, SFDC and ISG over here. Thanks a lot for all your participation.
Thank you, Mr. Auty. Now it's time to wrap up. And I would once again like to thank all of you present here for sparing your time and being with us throughout the session today. I would also like to thank our esteemed speakers for their valuable time and inputs. I hope you all found this event insightful and engaging as much as we enjoyed putting it all together. Finally, my heartfelt gratitude to our power partner, Tech Mahindra and Salesforce. Thank you and wish you all safety and good health in the days to come.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.